Okay, delighted to say now we're joined by former Republic of Ireland international Matt Holland. Matt's here to talk about Ipswich and how they went from a playoff winning club to challenging for a European spot in the Premier League the following season. Good to have you back, Matt. I know last time we talked to you, we talked about the World Cup in 2002, and this is actually just before that. You enjoyed such a successful spell with Ipswich. Championship very popular here because we've obviously got a lot of Irish players playing in the Championship, but as somebody who's played in it, what's it like? 46 games, tough slog.
It is a tough slog. It's very difficult. You tend to play Saturday, Tuesday throughout the season. When you've got a few niggles, you don't get a lot of time to recover and get yourself ready for the next game. I think there's not a lot of difference really between top and bottom in the division as well. So, teams at the bottom more than capable of beating the teams at the top. So it's a very demanding league, very challenging. And it can be tough.
Yeah, you mentioned like the niggles, but you were notorious for not being injured. You had this incredible run where you didn't miss a game. So what was the key there?
Sure. I think I certainly had a few niggles, that's for sure. And there was a few times I probably played when I maybe shouldn't have done at times. I think George Burley just kept wheeling me out. I think my fitness test lasted about sort of 2 or 3 minutes, if ever I had one, and he sort of said, yeah, you'll be fine and you can play. So I played a few times when I probably shouldn't have done as well. Okay,
so the 2000 season, or it's the year 2000 you get promoted, but the season beforehand you'd finished third, and we see it a lot of times where the team that just misses out on automatic promotion, the disappointment of that, it creeps into the playoffs, and maybe there's a team that makes a late break, and that's the way it worked out. Bolton actually beat you in the semi-finals of the playoffs in '99. So how hard was it to recover going into the next season?
To be honest, that was the third time unlucky. We'd been in the playoffs 3 consecutive seasons. The time we actually went up was the 4th consecutive season. So we'd kept the nucleus of the team together for a number of years, added 1 or 2 players in the summer each time, and ready to go again. I mean, that's all you can do, to be honest. When you get knocked down, you have to get back up again. And fortunately, we had a very good squad, very tight squad as well, and we were able to do that year on year.
And central to all that was George Burley. He was there since 1994. So, you would have played most of your Ipswich career would have been under George Burley. And when you think of George Burley as a manager, Ipswich was his best spell. What was the magic? What worked for him there?
Well, obviously he was an ex-Ipswich player for many years, had a lot of success as a player. And I think sometimes when you're a manager, you get a little bit longer from the supporters because you've got a good history at the club previously. So I think that was probably the case, because when he first took the job, I think he took Ipswich, he took Ipswich down, took Ipswich at a difficult time, but they went down from the Premier League. But he was given time to build. I think the thing about George was he had a really good eye for a player, and he picked up some bargains really from down the leagues. But he also was not afraid of playing the youth players as well. And I think that was important to us. The likes of Richard Wright, Kieran Dyer, James Scowcroft all coming through the youth team. Later on, it was Darren Bent and Darren Ambrose. So he wasn't afraid of playing the young players that had been coming through the system as well. But he married that up with the experienced players that he brought in as well, because, as I say, he had a good eye for a player.
Marcus Stewart was one of those players, wasn't he? He had a good eye for him because he had a great record at Ipswich.
Yeah, he was terrific. His movement was right up there with the very best. I mean, he was probably a yard short of being a top-class centre-forward. I mean, he was very, very good, and perhaps very unlucky not to have got an England call-up, to be honest, particularly in the year in the Premier League when he scored, I think, 19 goals that season. But his movement was so good, and a joy for a midfielder to play with, because you sort of knew where he was going to be and when he was going to make the move. So he was a really big player for us.
Okay, so the 1999-2000 season, we've just talked about how you've missed out on the playoffs 3 seasons in a row. There you are, you're fighting for automatic promotion again, but you come up just short, 2 points behind Manchester City, and Charlton got promoted that season as well. So going into the playoffs, what's the feeling? What are you thinking? Are you thinking, here we go again?
Yeah, well, right. Last day of the season, I think we were in a position with about half an hour to go where we thought we were going up automatically, and then Man City ran away with their game and ended up winning their game comfortably. So with 20 minutes to go in the season, half an hour to go in the season, we thought we were going up automatically. And then obviously we're into the playoffs. I think that there was a feeling that year, I don't know why, we just thought that it would be our year. And I say that because we've been behind in lots of games, so many games, but there was so much character about this team. And we always came back. And I think the semi-final against Bolton, we went behind 2-0 in the first leg, and we got that back to 2-2. I think we went behind in the second leg as well, won that game, and then we went behind in the final. It was just the way we sort of did things. Didn't make it easy for ourselves, but we had a real character about it. So I think going into the playoffs that year, we just had a feeling, I think, that it was going to be our year.
Just talk to me about what it's like to play in a playoff final. Obviously, you captained the team that day as well against Barnsley. You know, we love it as neutrals. We love watching the playoffs and the drama, but it's high stakes. It's called the most expensive game in club football because of what's at stake, that chance to get into the Premier League. As a player, what's the pressure like?
Well, it is a pressured environment because you're right. I mean, it's win or bust. You either win and you're into the promised land of the Premier League, or you lose and you're back in the Championship again. And as I say, we've been knocking on the door. It was our fourth consecutive year of the playoffs. So, and it was actually the first time we got to the final as well. So perhaps a little bit more pressure on us, the fact that it had been so long knocking on the door, and we had to get over the line, really. I think if we hadn't got over the line that year, we'd have lost a lot of players in the summer, and that would have been difficult to recover from. So it is a high-pressured game, very intense. We prepared pretty much as we would for any other game, though. I mean, I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, I wasn't fortunate enough to play in cup finals per se, the FA Cup, League Cup, whatever it might be. But to play in a playoff final, I think it's sort of just as pressured as those environments, I think.
So you obviously win, and I can imagine the celebrations, and then the realisation that you're going to be a Premier League footballer. That was the dream, when you're a kid growing up, and sometimes you get rejected, but then you've got yourself to the Premier League. When you think of going into that season, I don't think you were given much of a chance of even staying in the Premier League, were you?
I think any team that gets promoted, they're automatically favourites to go straight back down again, and particularly the team that go up via the playoffs as well, simply because your season's ended so much later. It's difficult to get players in time for the new season. I think automatically you are the favourites to go bottom of the league. And so for us, I think it was just an excitement. And then a lot of the players hadn't played at that level as well. So I think there was a lot of excitement, and you want to test yourself against the very best. And I think that was probably the feeling that we had going into the season.
Yeah, and it turned out to be an incredible season. You finished 5th in the Premier League, and at one stage it was looking like you could get a European Cup spot. Top 3 got European Cup that season, or Champions League, sorry, and you finished 5th. Some standout moments, just looking at, like, you beat Liverpool at Anfield. I remember that game. Marcus Stewart scored. You drew at United, Arsenal and Liverpool at Portman Road. What was so good about this team? How were you able to progress from being a team that challenges at the top of the Championship to the Premier League?
I just think we had a really good balance. I think we had good footballers who were comfortable playing at that level. I think we had, a goal scorer in Marcus Stewart, which was really important. I think if you're going to do well in the league, then you need somebody to put the ball in the back of the net. And Marcus Stewart was very important for that. I think the key for us that year was probably the first home game of the season. You just mentioned it, actually, the game against Man United. We played Spurs the opening game of the season. We took the lead, but we ended up losing the game 3-1. And that was a sort of a wake-up call. Right? We're here, and we don't punish teams, then we're going to get punished ourselves. That's exactly what happened in that game. But the first home game of the season, we drew with Man United. We drew 1-1 at home. And I think that moment on gave us the belief that we could, if we could deal with Man United, we could deal with anybody, if you like, and on our day, give anybody a game. So I think that game against United really set us up nicely.
Is it easier in a way to play in the Premier League, just the style, where you can actually get the ball down and pass it. You're not going to be playing against teams that are a bit more direct like they would be in the Championship, because obviously if you're playing 46 games, you can't always play a pressing game or a high energy game, so sometimes you have to go direct. Whereas in the Premier League, you're going to be playing teams that will knock it about. Maybe that suits you.
Yeah, maybe gave us a bit more time and space on the ball. I'm thinking back, I don't know how many teams played that way, but we played three at the back as well, because George was keen of us playing through, playing from the back through midfield and using the wide players, the wing backs as well. So I can't recall too many teams playing that way as well. So it was just a style maybe that some of the teams weren't particularly used to as well. So that might be something.
What was it like then? I mentioned some of the standout moments, obviously the Anfield win, but what's it like going to those grounds? Those big grounds,
time, yeah. For the first time in particular, I mean, it's what you, like you say, what you dream of, to go and play against the very best, play at some of the iconic stadiums. My actual favourite memory that year would have been Everton away. Funnily enough, we won at Liverpool. You're right, on Merseyside, but the favourite victory would have been the game against Everton, because we beat them 3-0, and that was probably one of our, if not the best performance of the season, to be honest. We played some unbelievable stuff, and at the final whistle we were applauded off by the Everton fans, and that meant so much to us as a team. Going off and the opposition fans applauding you off the pitch was something special.
As a midfielder, who were the midfielders you went up against in the Premier League that season where you thought, wow, this guy is a good player?
Crikey, I mean, there were so many talented players. I mean, for me, you look at the very, very best, and that's Roy Keane, Patrick Vieira, people like that, who were right at the top of the tree, really. Your most difficult opponents, and the ones that you wanted to test yourself against, but they would be the iconic ones, probably.
And I mentioned that the fact that you finished in 5th place. When as a group of players, did you think, do you know what, we're onto something here? We can actually get a European spot?
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I mean, I remember at the start of the season sort of setting targets, as you do as a group of players, managers sitting us down, what do you think we can achieve, where can we get to, and you sort of set yourself a target, how many points you might get. And throughout the course of the season, that's sort of changing as we went along, really. Then it sort of, rather than for the season, it became per month. What can we get this month? And then all of a sudden, it's can we get into those top positions? We actually did have a chance. You're right, into the last game of the season, even finishing in the Champions League places. I think we needed Liverpool to slip up, and we needed to win ourselves. I think we drew against Derby last game of the season, and Liverpool won, so it didn't matter anyway because Liverpool had won. But we had an outside chance getting to the last game of the season, finishing the Champions League spots, which was pretty special as well.
Yeah, and there's always that danger when, if you have set your target, that it could be, we obviously hear a lot about the magic 40 points. I think back to West Brom under Tony Pulis, they used to get to 40 points and they were just hopeless afterwards. So when you realise, there's no chance of us getting relegated, surely that takes a lot of pressure off. But can you see why some teams might take their foot off the gas?
Yeah, I've been there myself a few times at Charlton. And we were at Charlton, we were sort of renowned for that as well a little bit, under Alan Kirbishley, where we sort of got to 40 points, stayed in the division, and then we didn't finish the season off particularly well. So, yeah, I can totally see it. I don't know, that season we just got on a roll. We were playing well. We, as I say, fancied our chances against anybody, and managed to keep the momentum going throughout the course of the season.
Obviously, with such a good season, then comes expectations. The fans are thinking, right, we're getting used to this. We'd like a bit more of this. And then you have a European campaign the following season. Didn't go too well. Was that down, do you think, to the European campaign? I'm looking at Burnley at the moment, where I'm wondering, are they going to pay the price for playing European football early in the season?
Do you know, I mean, I think I look back now and I always ask myself, why did it not go so well that following season? I think there's a number of factors. I think Europe is definitely one, because, as I say, that first year of playing in the Premier League was something new, something special, and you wanted to play in the Premier League. The following year, we'd done that, but then it was Europe. Not many of us, if any, have played in European competitions. So then we said, perhaps took our eye off the ball, I think, a little bit from the Premier League. And we actually had a great spell around Christmas after we'd been knocked out of Europe, and we almost kept ourselves up. But I think in the first sort of 3 months of the season, I do think we took their eye off the ball. I think that it was, and I wouldn't blame it on the individuals that came in, but there was a few players that we signed on for bigger money, if you like, and on bigger money, and that maybe disrupted how some of the players felt about the situation as well. So I think there's a number of mitigating factors. So yeah, it was very frustrating, particularly back in the season when we had we probably should have stayed up. After the spell we had around Christmas, I think we won 7 out of 8 games and really gave ourselves a good chance, but we had a tough run in and we couldn't quite do it.
You're the captain of the club. Are you almost like an agony aunt? You just mentioned there like some of the players that might have come in, and maybe some of the other players who've been at the club a bit longer, they come up to you and they say, Matt, I heard this guy's getting a lot more money than I am, but I've been at the club longer, I think I'm a better player than him. Is this something that happens?
Yeah, it is. That's part of your role as the captain, really, to be a sounding board, and players who perhaps aren't comfortable going to speak to the management or the coaching staff, they maybe want to go to the captain and do it that way. I mean, I remember my first season actually at Ipswich, and I remember talking to Tony Mowbray, who was the club captain then, and I just had a good season the first year at Ipswich. I got Player of the Year, and I sort of went to him and said, there's a few lads here on much better money than I am. I'm on this and I'm on that. And he said, just forget about the money. I mean, it's the best advice I've ever got. He said, just forget about the money. He said, you see that green thing out on the pitch? He said, that's the most important thing. You do it on there and the money will find you. He said, that's all you've got to worry about. Your job on a Saturday. You do that right and the money will find you. And that was the best advice I've ever got. And I've sort of passed it on to a number of players since.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it applies nowadays, though. I don't think the modern players listen to that anymore. Unfortunately, agents have taken over. As I said, unfortunately, that season ends in relegation, and that's the last time Ipswich were in the Premier League, which, for a club that has a good tradition and has been in the Premier League, has obviously won a major European trophy. We know there's a lot going on there now. Mick McCarthy has left the club. You obviously keep an eye on how they're doing. What do you make of the whole situation at the moment? Yeah, I was there the opening game of the season, actually, against Blackburn. I'm there next week as well for the derby against Norwich. It is tough. They're actually the team that's been in the Championship the longest now of any club, without going up or without going down. So it's been pretty steady, hasn't it, for quite a few years now at Ipswich. This year's a difficult one, I think, for them. Obviously, a new manager's come in. I think that the wage bill's probably come down a little bit. There's been a big turnover of players. He's tried to stamp his own authority on things, and he's brought in, 9-10 new signings. But a lot of them have come from League One and League Two. And I think it's a big ask to get that many players stepping up at one time, up to a Championship side, and asking them to make the leap, if you like. I think if you do it with one or two and you've got a settled team, then that's easier. So I think it's going to be really difficult for them. From what I've seen, I think they've got some decent players. I think scoring goals is going to be their major issue. But hopefully they'll have enough to at least finish mid-table, if you like, and not have any relegation worries. But yeah, it's a difficult time at the moment for the club. Yeah, look, there was never any chance of them getting relegated under Mick McCarthy, and the fact that they're the longest club in the Championship at the moment, you can see why the club or the supporters were getting fed up. They were thinking, we want something different. But I wonder, with all this change, if they end up getting relegated, what will the supporters think then? Would you rather stay in the Championship with Mick McCarthy, knowing there's no chance you're going to get relegated, but because of the budget, there's very little chance you're going to get promoted? Or you can bring in all these younger players, inexperienced players, maybe they can develop, and maybe in a few seasons you could push for promotion. Well, look, people know what I think about Mick. Absolutely love him to bits, and I thought he did a good job at Ipswich. But I think probably the time, even by his own admission, I would say, had probably run its natural course. I think that there was a feeling between the supporters and Mick at the end of last season, which was a pretty hostile environment, and I think it had probably run its course, if I'm totally honest.
But as I say, I do think it's difficult for a new manager to come in and make that many changes. Now, obviously, you want to bring in your own people, you have your own ideas, and want to do things slightly differently. I think, as I say, when it's 9 or 10 players come in at one time, I think that can be pretty difficult to get it all right straight away. We've seen that with 1 or 2 teams in the Premier League as well this season. West Ham have made loads of signings that haven't quite happened yet. Fulham made loads of signings that hasn't quite happened yet. So I think when you make that many changes, it is difficult.